Well, hello and welcome again to Christ Baptist Church Devotional. We're going through the book of Nehemiah, and we're now at the last chapter, Nehemiah chapter 13. We've gone through all 12 chapters, getting lessons from each chapter, and this is getting toward the end of the recorded Israel's history, where they left Babylon in 538 BC and eventually made it to Jerusalem and built the kingdom, or built the walls of Jerusalem and built the temple, and put that all together about 444 BC. So about almost 100 years, 95 years or so. Took them from the time when they left, when they had a real city. And the governor Nehemiah was there, and he came after despair of seeing that the city had been broken down. It had gone through several cycles of joy. They came and they tried to build something quickly, and then they had to stop, and then they built again, and then they stopped and went back and forth. And we see that through the times recorded in the book of Ezra, and also in the book of Esther. There was a time there where Israel was almost extinguished as a people group, but God preserved them and put Queen Esther in as being the queen of the Persian Empire, along with her cousin Mordecai, who actually was ruling and running the empire during that time. Well, now we'll find ourselves in Nehemiah chapter 13. It's sometime into his ministry there. He's not a priest. He's not a prophet. He was a governor. He was an administrator. He was someone who knew how to get things done, and also was well versed in the law, so he knew what was right. He applied God's law in his work, you might say, as running the affairs of Jerusalem. Let's find out these last issues. It doesn't end real well, but it ends with our understanding of the need for strong leadership in God's economy, with God's people. Always a need for strong leaders to present the law of God to the people, especially in the Old Covenant. When we don't have the Spirit in our hearts, we'll want to go this way and that way. We'll see what happens with Nehemiah here, chapter 13. Verse 1. On that day they read aloud from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people, and there was found written in it that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God, because they did not meet the sons of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. However, our God turned the curse into a blessing. So when they heard the law, they excluded all foreigners from Israel. Stop there for a moment. So again, on that day tells us sometime in the future, we don't know when. And I think what we'll see as we go further on down, we realize this is some time later, after they built the wall and been going. This is now people that have been established for a while. They understood what was going on. They'd been there. They'd been under Ezra, then 13 years passed, and then they'd been under Nehemiah for a while. And for the first at least 10 chapters, we saw that what they were dealing with was building the wall, getting security, keeping the enemies from without, and then hearing the word preached and getting their hearts right, and they wrote a covenant. Now we find ourselves on that day, which is like some other day, long into the future. They had a reading again, and they read this time where it says there's no Ammonite or Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God. This is Deuteronomy 23, verses 3 to 6. And we see the reason why that the Nehemiah tells us here, which is coming out of Deuteronomy. It says, because the Moabites and the Ammonites did not meet the sons of Israel with bread and water when they were wandering in the desert and they're eventually coming into their land. No, they instead hired Balaam to curse them, a wicked prophet who eventually died. And so because of that, no Moabite or Ammonite is supposed to go into the assembly of God. So when they heard the law, they excluded all foreigners from Israel. So as soon as they heard that preaching, they immediately went and said, okay, all you people out. But now to show you how blind they were. People they don't know. It's easy to tell somebody out when you don't know them. It's no big deal. But when the sin is actually very personal, it becomes blind. We're blind to our own personal sin. Look here at verse 4. Now prior to this, Eliashib the priest, who was appointed over the chambers of the house of our God, being related to Tobiah. Remember Tobiah, the Ammonite. He is an enemy Tobiah the Ammonite. We saw him in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 10, started, and he just continued to hound Nehemiah. Well, here it is. Eliashib the priest is related to Tobiah. How can you be related? Unless you've had sons and daughters marrying into Tobiah's family. Well, it says Eliashib the priest, he's related to Tobiah. He had prepared a large room for him, where formerly they put the grain offerings, the frankincense, the utensils, and the tithes of grain, wine, and oil prescribed for the Levites, the singers and the gatekeepers, and the contributions for the priests. Normally it was a storehouse for all the stuff that you give to the priests, because the priests need to live. The priests need a way to eat, and they need to have a way to take care of things. This is where they stored all that stuff. Well, Elisha the priest just cleared all that stuff out to make room for Tobiah, his relative, the enemy. Verse 6, but during all this time I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had gone to the king. After some time, however, I asked leave from the king. So this says, during all this time that this was going on, Nehemiah wasn't there. Because in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, now when was Nehemiah chapter 1? When did they go chapter 1 all the way through to chapter 9 or so? That was 444 BC. Now we got to subtract 12 years. And so we're talking really 432 BC. 12 years later. Because he says, in the 32nd year, that's 12 years from the 20th year of Artaxerxes, plus 12 is 32 years, his 32nd year. That's how we get 12 years. 12 years from 444 BC is 432 BC. So, 12 years later, at least 12 years, probably a little bit more, because he said he was gone 12 years. So during all this time, I went to Jerusalem. In the 32nd year, I'd gone to the king. After some time, however, I asked leave from the king to come back. So in the 12th year, in the 32nd year, which is 12 after Nehemiah chapter 1, he went back to see the king of Persia. After some time, so it's more than 12 years, he came back. So now the point is, Jerusalem's been running for a while. It was running at least for 12 years, because from the 20th year to the 32nd year, Nehemiah was there. Everything was running smoothly, but he was gone for a time. So, when he came back, verse 7 tells us, and I came to Jerusalem and learned about the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah by preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God. It was very displeasing to me, so I threw all of Tobiah's household goods out of the room, just chucked them out. Just went in and cleaned house, took all of Tobiah's stuff, threw it out. Verse 9, then I gave an order, and they cleansed the rooms, and I returned there the utensils of the house of God with the grain offerings and the frankincense. So, Nehemiah's gone for a brief period of time, and all of a sudden, here's all this nonsense. Tobiah is related to Eliashib the priest, and Eliashib says, yeah, come on in, we got a room for you, we'll clear all this stuff that we normally give the Levites and go. Tobiah's been an enemy of the people. Now, what's interesting about this is that Tobiah's relationship with Eliashib, the priest, didn't just happen when Nehemiah was gone. This would have been a secret thing that would have happened for a while. They were together. And so, in verse 3, when they heard the law, they excluded all foreigners from Israel, but not this, because it was personal. He didn't see anything wrong with it. This is the priest. Well, we go on. Verse 10. I also discovered that the portions of the Levites had not been given them, so that the Levites and the singers who performed the service had gone away, each to his own field. So I reprimanded the officials and said, why is the house of God forsaken? Then I gathered them together and restored them to all their posts. All Judah then brought the tithe of the grain, the wine, and oil in the storehouses. In charge of the storehouses, I appointed Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, Pedaiah of the Levites, and in addition to them was Hanan the son of Zachar, the son of Mattithiah, for they were considered reliable, and it was their task to distribute to their kinsmen. Remember me for this, O my God, and do not blot out my loyal deeds which I perform for the house of my God and its services. This is certainly loyal deeds. This is now Nehemiah realizing after he cleaned out Tobiah's place and cleaned it so he could put the storehouse and stuff back in there, he discovered that the portions, the stuff that's supposed to be given to the Levites, weren't given to them. And because the people weren't getting paid, they each went away, each to his own field, verse 10 says. They said, if I'm not getting paid, I'm starving here, so I got to go back to my field and work. So Nehemiah took care of this and said, why is this happening? The blame isn't with the Levites who left. The blame is you're not giving them their tithe. You're not handling the economy of God properly. You're either lazy, you're tied up in sin with allowing the world, Tobiah, and the enemies to come into the house of God, the assembly of God, no big deal, we're all together. And you're not even taking care of your priests. So you're taking care of Tobiah, but not the priests. We see this in all of Scripture. David is more concerned with Absalom and his people, the ones who tried to take over the kingdom, than he is with the people who are following him. Joab even told him, says, you wish that he was alive and we were dead. Sometimes we Christians have to be careful that we don't overextend and worry about the lost, worry about the people who are enemies of God, and we care for them, and then we abandon our own people. We're called to take care of our family. We're not called to go out to the world. We're called to be lights to the world, but not to abandon our people so that we take care of Tobiah. That's a big issue. It took Nehemiah to be able to see that. Excuse me. Verse 15. Here's the next issue. Again, we saw they got Tobiah staying in the storehouse. We're not taking care of the Levites. What's the third thing they're doing? It's the Sabbath. Verse 15. In those days I saw in Judah some who were treading wine presses on the Sabbath, bringing in sacks of grain and loading them on the donkeys, as well as wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of loads. And they brought them into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. So I admonished them on the day they sold food. Also men of Tyre were living there who imported fish and all kinds of merchandise and sold them to the sons of Judah on the Sabbath, even in Jerusalem. Then I reprimanded the nobles of Judah and said to them, what is this evil thing you're doing by profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do the same, so that your God brought on us and all this city all this trouble? Yet you're adding to the wrath of Israel by profaning the Sabbath. It came about that just as it grew dark at the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I commanded that the doors should be shut, and they should not open them at all until after the Sabbath. Then I stationed some of my servants at the gate so that no load would enter on the Sabbath day. Once or twice, the traders and merchants of every kind of merchandise spent the night outside Jerusalem. Then I warned them and said to them, why do you spend the night in front of the wall? If you do so again, I will use force against you. From that time on, they did not come on the Sabbath. And I commanded the Levites that they should purify themselves and come as gatekeepers to sanctify the Sabbath day. For this also remember me, O my God, and have compassion on me according to the greatness of your loving kindness. So what do we see here in verses 15 to 22? The people were disregarding the Sabbath and its law that was in the law of Moses. I count here 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times the words the Sabbath days mentioned. I'd say that's pretty important. Pretty important. It starts off in verse 15. There was some treading wine, working, getting ready for production on the Sabbath. And they're bringing in all kinds of loads on the Sabbath day. Verse 16, men of Tyre. See, Gentiles are coming in. So really what's the issue? The issue is that while, some were working there on 15 on the Sabbath day, people from outside, the Gentiles were coming in on the Sabbath. You see, Moses had told people not to buy or sell to each other on the Sabbath. Don't do any work with each other. That's when Israel was a community to itself. Now you got foreigners. What do you do with international trade? Is it illegal to sell to a foreigner on the Sabbath? I don't know. Maybe it sounds okay to me. You see, the people had lost the heart of God. They didn't care about using the Sabbath as a way to rest and rely on God's provision, to depend on God, as well as take a time to worship God, saying we will be in His rest someday. Nah, that's not really what it's about. It just means we can't work, and it means, I guess, we can't work by selling stuff to each other, but we can certainly sell stuff to foreigners, because that doesn't count. So they did that. And so in verse 18, we see Nehemiah's response to them, saying, what are you doing? The reprimand starts in verse 17. What is this evil thing you're doing by profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do the same, so that our God brought on us and our city all this trouble? Yet you're adding to the wrath of Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So you're doing this, because that's one of the reasons why God sent Babylon in to destroy them, because they didn't care about the Sabbath day. And they didn't care for sure about the Sabbath rest, which is the 7 years, which put them in Babylon for 70 years. So they were completely ignoring the Sabbath, not sanctifying it, didn't care about it. And so verse 22 is what he did. And he threatened the foreigners. I mean, he took charge. Nehemiah took charge. And sometimes to really get things right in terms of getting the law of God, the following law, this takes time. When godlessness sets in, it's difficult. It takes strength. You have to be resolute to wipe out sin from the camp. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes to be called out on sin. It's no fun. He goes and commands the Levites that they got to purify themselves, come as gatekeepers to sanctify the Sabbath day. And again, he says the same thing he said in verse 14. He says, for this also remember me, O my God, and have compassion on me according to the greatness of your loving kindness. He needs compassion because he knows he's being hard. He's being firm. He's telling people they can't trade. He's cutting their income, because what they're doing is not right. You got to trust God. So we saw that they've got a sin issue with having Tobiah, who's related to Elijah the priest, which is crazy. How does that even work? But they made a room for him. They got rid of him. They weren't taking care of their priest, but they were taking care of Tobiah, so they got that squared away. And now they're not even thinking about God on the Sabbath day. So Nehemiah had to just completely change the market. And remember, he'd been gone. He left after the 12th year. He'd gone for a while, and now he came back. And all this happened just so quick. He came back. And then finally, the same problem that Ezra had. He realized that they were all intermarrying. Look at verse 23. In those days I also saw that Jews had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. As for their children, half spoke in the language of Ashdod, and none of them was able to speak the language of Judah, but the language of his own people. The Jewish children were not able to speak Hebrew anymore. They could only speak the language of Ashdod. So they were really having trouble even maintaining their own culture here. And so Nehemiah could see there was a huge problem. He saw that. In those days he saw that. So verse 25, so I contended with them and cursed them and struck some of them and pulled out their hair, made them swear by God, you shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor take of their daughters for your sons or for yourselves. Do you remember this? Remember this in the covenant? Let me just read it. You can read it together here. So we see this as they put this in the covenant in basically chapter 10. I think they had this covenant right here, verse 30, chapter 10, verse 30, and that we will not give our daughters to the peoples of the land or take their daughters for our sons. This is a big thing. Because of religion, you don't intermarry. Not because of race, because of religion, because of belief. You don't marry outside the faith. And so he said that you shall not give your daughters to their sons, or take of your daughters for your sons or for yourselves. And then here's the reason why, verse 26. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin regarding these things? Yet among the many nations there was no king like him, and he was loved by his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, Nevertheless, the foreign women caused even him to sin. How about that? That little word even, so important there. The foreign women caused even Solomon. Who could ever... Man, Solomon's... If anyone's not going to fall, it's Solomon, son of David. Even Solomon sinned. Absolutely. Do we then hear about you that you have committed all this great evil by acting unfaithfully against our God by marrying foreign women? And here he calls out what we learned in verses 3 and 4. Even one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was son-in-law of Sanballat the Horonite. So I drove him away from me. The other enemy, Sanballat. The son of the high priest is the son-in-law of Sanballat, the high priest. So he drove him away. And again, we see the same statement Nehemiah makes on this one. Remember them, O my God, because they've defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. Thus I purified them from everything foreign and appointed duties for the priests and the Levites, each in his task. And I arranged for the supply of wood at appointed times and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. Remember, remember, remember. As he's seeking to restore order of God's law in the community. He was only gone a short time. He had already been governor there 12 years. Look what happened. Without strong leadership, pointing continuously to obeying the law of God, without strong leadership, it's easy to have sin be where you just give up on marriage and you let your children marry outside the faith, and now you say, well, we got to let them in, so now we're accepting non-Christian things into our culture, into our family, because we have to be kind and do that. And then what that does is that means I don't attend church a couple times a month because I'm with that other side of the family. You know how it is. Maybe I'll say I'll just evangelize. That's why you don't. That's why you really are strong as parents to say you don't marry outside the faith. Because this is what happens. It'll all pull you outside the faith because you're saying I'm being kind. This is such a big deal. It affected them to where they made room in the temple for Tobiah and threw out all the food so they wouldn't pay the Levites. So we're going to make the Levites suffer because Tobiah's family marries into the priest's family. So because they take in an unbeliever, we're going to make the believers suffer. Well, there couldn't be anything more backwards than that. And we see it here in Ezra, we see it here in Nehemiah, and unfortunately we do see it here today, where we don't make those provisions and worry about whether our children are marrying inside or outside of the faith, and even ourselves. If one is, a widow and whatnot, you go to marry, if it's outside the faith, it'll take you outside. So much so, they ended up making room for an unbeliever, hurting the believers, and then saying, let's do all our commerce on the Sabbath. It doesn't matter, especially if it's with Gentiles anyway. And then we're back to remarrying again. Because once we've said okay to sin, we pretty much say okay to all kinds of sin. Don't think you're being tough by saying, yeah, but I won't do this. Yes, you will. You'll say, I'm not doing this until you do it, and now your standard is lower. Happens every time. Every time. This is the power of sin. It's so deceptive. Now, Nehemiah ends this way, but it's not the end of the story, because while we finish Nehemiah, there's one more book to go through to finish out the whole spectrum of the return. The return from the exile is the book of Malachi, the last prophet, the last book of the Old Testament, because his prophecies, his prophetic input was during the time of Nehemiah. So we're going to catch that. We'll see you then when we open up the book of Malachi.